Love that song. Alright, here we go. Today's lecture is on 5.5 environmental policy. Let's do it. Alright. So again, we're talking about regulation, and the topic today is on the environment. Alright, so our environmental policy in America is affected by federalism. You have this kind of situation of states versus the national government, and centralization versus decentralization. Where the federal government's in charge, you'd have centralization. Where the states are in charge, you would have decentralization. And there is this conflict between the two, the states and national government, about regulation. Maybe Obama wants to pass standards for car emissions. Maybe the states don't want to pass those standards. Or maybe Obama wants to say that factories can only pollute so much. And maybe states say they don't have a problem with pollution because they don't want businesses to leave their state and go to China or something because. So there's often this conflict between the national government and the states. The national government would like to have a more uniform policy, and the states would like to be more business friendly so that businesses don't leave the state, because then the state would lose tax money. For example, a lot of businesses in the last few years have left California because we probably have right up there in the top 1 or 2 strictest environmental standards in the whole country. Alright, so the key issue is not whether or not the environment should be protected. I think everybody thinks the environment should be protected. It's just a matter of how much it should be protected and how much money should we spend to protect it. And it's kind of a delicate balance to control the two, because the people of America do want to have a clean environment. Businesses don't want to have to pay too much to control their pollution or follow the rules that the government sets. And if I'm a worker, I'm concerned maybe that if businesses are overregulated, that they're going to have to spend more money on a filter for the smokestack on the roof, and I'm going to get laid off. So there's a concern that excessive regulation could lead to a loss in jobs. And an example of this is logging restrictions. I use this in another PowerPoint, like if there's a spotted owl who's endangered, and you're cutting down trees and suddenly you can't cut anymore, that's also going to affect a worker. They're going to lose their job because they can't cut down trees. Okay, I put all this on one slide. You don't necessarily need to know what each of these different from each other, but certainly if any of these appeared on a test, you should have an idea of the topic that they relate to. So the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, environmental regulation. The Air Quality Act of 1967, and various Clean Air Acts, there's been quite a few of them, all had to do with environmental regulation. They set standards for how much factories could pollute, if you want to add that to your notes. Set standards for how much factories could pollute, or maybe cars. Various Clean Water Acts of the 1970s and 80s, I think you can figure out what those are. In 1970, Richard Nixon, of all people, Republican president, created the Environmental Protection Agency. Here's a controversial one, the Endangered Species Act of 1973. This is the one that says if you have the spotted owl and you're cutting down trees, the whole forest is shut down. You can no longer cut down trees. Or how about those turtles in the desert? If a turtle is killed, you're going to have to pay $50,000 for every turtle that you kill on accident. How about CAFE, which is the Corporate Average Fuel Economy Standards, which set average miles per gallon standards for cars. So if the government didn't tell car companies they had to have a certain miles per gallon, we might still have cars that get very poor mileage, like like a Honda Civic today gets nearly 40 miles to the gallon. If it wasn't for these regulations, maybe Honda wouldn't really care, and the cars would just get 25 miles to the gallon. So incorporating these regulations has made cars, forced them to have better miles per gallon. There was also the creation of something called the Superfund in 1980. The Superfund is literally a fund of money that all of the taxpayers have to pay into, and part of your general tax. It's not like you don't really notice it necessarily. And it goes to clean up toxic waste dumps. So if you find out that your backyard and your whole city of Eastvale or something has a bunch of chemicals that were dumped here in the 1980s, you find it today, this fund will come and they'll help clean up the area with the money that taxpayers have all paid into. Talking about miles per gallon again, Some of you guys, if you've ever been new car shopping with your parents, maybe for you, maybe for them, you see this sticker on the window, and every car has to list what kind of miles per gallon they get. Notice they get different miles per gallon in the city than the highway. Highway's almost always usually higher, unless maybe you have some kind of electric hybrid car, in which case the city sometimes can be higher. It even has your annual estimated fuel cost. This is all because the federal government said they had to do this. Okay, and it's the federal government that actually drives the car and verifies that these numbers are correct, not some guy that works for Honda. All right. This is not in your notes, but I looked it up. The Obama administration has passed regulations that tell car makers that by 2025 they'll need to double the average gas mileage of all their new trucks and new cars. To give you an idea of what that means by 2025 the average car will need to get about 55 miles per gallon. Can you imagine? So that's about now it's about 11 years away. That every car will need to get around 55. Now that means a truck maybe can get 35, but a sedan will need to get like 70 in order to average that out if you do the math. So kind of cool in a way, but the sad thing is probably in 11 years gas will be $6.50 a gallon or something. All right, there are 4 different types of environmental policies. Type A is entrepreneurial environmental policies. These are programs that have narrow, concentrated costs with wide benefits. For example, the Clean Air Acts. Who's going to pay to have clean air? Well, the factory owners will have to pay to have clean air, but everybody benefits, okay? So that makes it a narrow cost, narrow because only the factory pays, and wide benefits because everybody benefits. Another example is in Nevada, they have a nuclear waste dump site. Nevada didn't want this, but it got put there anyway by the U.S. Congress, and that's where all the states kind of go to dump their nuclear waste in Yucca Mountain. This is a narrow, concentrated cost. Only Nevada pays, but the entire nation benefits. If you're a factory owner, or if you're Nevada, this whole thing really pisses you off and you fight it very hard. You don't want this. You don't want to be the one to have to pay the cost. And the average citizen isn't really that interested because they don't see the benefits as that big of a deal. They don't literally see the clean air. They don't really notice it until it's dirty. So they're not out there protesting and saying, make the factory owners pay for this new pipe on the top of their roof, because they don't necessarily see the benefits until it's too late, maybe. So here's an example. Factory polluting too much, we force them to install a little doohickey on top of the smokestack to maybe reduce the pollution, but it's the factory that has to pay, and so that is a narrow, concentrated cost with a wide benefit, and that falls under entrepreneurial environmental policies. This would be much cooler if it played at the speed that it was supposed to play. Oh, it's so much cooler if it played the right speed. Okay. Next up is majoritarian environmental policies. These have wide cost and wide benefits. For example, we all pay a gas tax that's supposed to discourage us from driving and reduce smog, and we use some of that money maybe to work on freeways or give to car manufacturers to install better devices on their car to make reduce smog, okay? Let's look at how much this costs. So you don't even realize this maybe, but we have about 54 cents of taxes on every gallon of gas that you buy. That's a lot of taxes. And California has the highest gas tax in the country. So only 18 cents of that is from the federal government, and 35 cents of it is from California. So that's added. And you can see a little sticker when you go to the gas station that says like 54 cents added to your total. Okay, another example of a majoritarian environmental policy is like smog checks. If you guys have a car, you might have had to deal with this. A smog check is every few years. If you have a used car that's not brand new, you have to take it down to get it check to make sure that it's not polluting the air too much. You have to pay for this out of your own pocket, something like $40. And then they check it, make sure that you're not polluting. If you are, you fail the check, and you have to repair your car, and then you get it checked again, and it can be kind of expensive. But virtually everybody pays these kind of taxes, like the smog check, but everybody benefits from it too. So it's a majoritarian environmental policy. Next up is interest group environmental policies. These have narrow cost and narrow benefits. An example is the Ellesmere Canyon dump, which is in Santa Clarita. The citizens had to pay for it, and the citizens benefit from it. And they weren't happy, but it got put in anyway. So narrow cost and narrow benefit. And lastly, we have client group environmental policies. These are programs that have wide cost and narrow benefit. So lots of people pay, not a lot of people benefit. An example is the super fund that I talked about. Everybody pays into this as part of their general taxes. And, well, hopefully you'll be happy that not a lot of us have a toxic waste dump in our backyard. But if you do, they'll use the super fund to come clean it out. And so it has wide costs, everybody pays, but only those with a toxic waste dump in their backyard actually would benefit from it. Okay? Okay, that's it. Thank you for joining me. Have a nice